After over 20 hours of collecting and analyzing data, I now have the stats and attack patterns of every entity in the radius. I'll start by explaining how damage and armor work, then I'll break down each entity's stats, attack patterns, and how to counter them effectively. So each type of entity has a set amount of health. For example, every scout mimic has 100 HP. Each time you shoot an entity, it'll take the amount of damage shown on your gun's stat sheet. The only exception is critical hits, which happen in two different ways. The more common one is from hitting their weak spot, which is always the head. If you hit the head, you'll get a critical hit 100% of the time, except on yourself. If it doesn't have a head, it doesn't have a weak spot. The second type of critical hit is what I call a statistical crit, which will give you a critical hit as often as your ammo's critical chance. For example, 9x39 ammo has a 6% chance of scoring a statistical crit, and 7.62x51 ammo has a 2% chance of scoring a statistical crit. On a critical hit, the damage is multiplied by the ammo's critical multiplier. For 9x39 ammo, there's a 4 times damage multiplier, while 7.62x51 ammo only has a 2 times damage multiplier. You'll notice I haven't said anything about Mimic's armor or ammo's armor penetration. Put simply, there's no armor system for entities. Sure, some Mimics appear to be wearing armor, and those entities tend to have more health, but there's no mechanics related to their armor like in the first game. Though, as far as I understand, it'll eventually be added in one form or another down the development path. That being said, we do have armor ourselves in the form of armor plates and helmets. This system is based on damage reduction, which is added up between your armor plate and helmet, and that total is subtracted from any damage taken. For example, an armor plate with 7 damage reduction and a helmet with 3 damage reduction adds up to a total of 10. If you're shot with a single bullet of 15 damage, you'll take only 5 damage instead. There is one important exception to the normal damage reduction system, which happens in cases where your total damage reduction is higher than the amount of damage you're supposed to be taking. In those cases, you'll still take a minimum of 1 damage, no matter how much damage reduction you have. For example, say you have 10 damage reduction and take 8 damage, you'll still take 1 damage. This makes interactions with the Hunter Mimic specifically quite interesting, but I'll get into that later. Alright, basics out of the way, let's get into the good stuff. There's a few tactics which work against all Mimics to varying degrees. The first strategy is the most obvious, hiding behind reflector anomalies as a reflective shield. As of 0.14, bullets will not reflect back at you, and the same goes for when Mimics shoot. It's usually a slow takedown, and it requires you to take a mental note of nearby reflector anomalies, but it's an extremely effective, safe, and cheap way to take out a Mimic, or even just cover your blind spot. The second tactic sounds dumb, but it works. Introducing the chicken wing method. Let's start with the question, have you ever paid attention to what specific part of your body Mimics target? You'd probably assume the chest or core since it's the largest surface area, which would be a logical guess. Though surprisingly, it's your right arm, lore-wise potentially due to the UMPSC patch located on your right shoulder. Why does it matter the Mimics target your arm? Well, you can move your right arm further away from your body. Naturally, the further away you keep your arm from the largest target to accidentally hit your upper body, the less often their shots will land. To use this in a practical setting, whenever you're running away from a Mimic or are out of ammo, you will statistically take less damage from Mimics when your right arm is all the way out. This is especially true the more inaccurate the Mimic is, and you can even flap your wings, move your right arm up and down to improve your odds. If that didn't blow your mind, brace for the third tactic, which completely breaks close quarters combat. First, you need to know that you can use the Explorer's Tablet to block bullets, just like a mini shield. On its own, it gives mediocre results. However, paired with the knowledge that Mimics are targeting your right arm, you get this. As crazy as this looks, I will add, this technique can be a bit finicky and has a sweet spot where it works best, but this alone has completely changed how I approach close quarters interactions. I personally will hold a pistol behind the tablet, wait for the Mimic to reload, and shoot for the head to get the crit. This has the added benefit of protecting your gun, which wears quickly if it's hit by enemy fire. Another tip as of 0.14.2 is to always use buckshot with any IZH-27. There's currently a bug that gives the IZH-27 an extra 20 damage with buckshot, which changes a couple interactions such as one-shotting Hunter Mimics. Now before I break down each Mimic's stats and firing patterns individually, it's important to know that Mimics have 3 states. First is a passive state where they'll either stand still or pace slowly. When close to a Mimic in a passive state, you're likely to hear children's voice lines. The only exception are the Hunter and Marksman Mimic, where you'll hear a whistle instead. Second is the suspicious state. Upon hearing you, the Mimic will actively search in the rough location where they heard the sound, and the voice line switch to an adult male sounding voice. kills. Lastly is the combat state, which is activated when a mimic sees you or is alerted to your position from a callout. In the combat state, mimics will quickly move within range, and they'll constantly reposition behind cover as they work to find a good angle. To know when a mimic is about to fire, listen for an attacking related voice line such as "I have contact" or "firing." Now let's get into the mimic stats, and I'll start with the Policeman mimic, translated to Policeman mimic. On normal, it has only 45 health and deals 8 damage, and on realistic, damage goes up by 25% up to 10. Wielding a special mutated PM, the Policeman mimic unsurprisingly has horrific accuracy, and it only holds 12 rounds per magazine. Once it spots you, it'll say a voice line as it begins to fire, then shoots 8 ammo, pauses for 1.1 seconds while saying a different voice line, shoots the remaining 4 ammo, and lastly takes exactly 3 seconds to reload before repeating the sequence. Next is the Hunter mimic. On normal, it has double the Policeman's health at 90. Two important interactions to keep in mind is that it can be one-shot by a Sega, Benelli M2, and most security level 4 firearms. Also, everything security level 2 or higher will one-shot the Hunter mimic with a critical hit, except for the Premium Bison or Premium Keter with FMJ ammo. The Hunter uses a double-barrel shotgun to fire 2 bullets at once, which are each made up of 5 projectiles that slowly separate with distance, making the Hunter mimic especially deadly at close range. Each projectile deals 4.5 damage, totaling up to a massive 45 damage if each pellet lands. However, due to how armor works, if your total damage reduction is 4 or higher, each individual projectile is reduced to only 1 damage. Thus, the best armor in the game, or even just a mediocre security level 2 armor plate and helmet combo, will both reduce the maximum potential damage from 45 to 10 damage per shot. Onto its attack pattern, it'll say a voice line as it begins to fire, shoot 2 bullets twice in quick succession, then it'll take 6.5 seconds to reload before repeating the sequence. The Scout mimic adds not only a useless extra hand, but also 10 more health to reach a flat 100. Even with that extra health, most interactions are similar to the Hunter mimic, but I'll point out specifically that it can't be one-shot with a crit by the Glock 18C, the MP9, or the Vityaz. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge how eloquently I pronounced that, so YouTube doesn't flag it as a swear for the subtitles. Anyway, the Scout mimic wields an AKS-74U, but only deals 10 damage per bullet. On realistic, it deals 12.5 damage per bullet, so using the maximum damage reduction of 12, the Scout mimic will only deal 1 damage per bullet on both normal and realistic. It has a magazine capacity of 30 bullets, and its shooting pattern consists of firing 27 to 30 shots with randomized split-second gaps in between. After this, if it has any ammo left, it'll pause for a third of a second and say a voice line, then fire the remaining 1 to 3 ammo. Lastly, it'll take 3.6 seconds to reload, and then it'll repeat the sequence. One more detail, depending on the randomized micro gaps, the longer first part of the sequence works out to about 8 or 9 bullets a second, so without protection, you can be killed in just over a second by the Scout. The Stormtrooper mimic is easy to confuse with the Scout mimic, though it has more camouflaged gear, wields an AKM, and has much higher health and damage. The health literally doubles from 100 up to 200, the magazine size goes up from 30 to an awkward 39, and the damage per bullet goes up to 16 on normal and 20 on realistic. With the maximum of 12 damage reduction on normal, the Scout mimic will only deal 1 damage per bullet, while the Stormtrooper mimic will deal 4 times more at 4 damage per bullet. This is important since the closer you get to the end game, the more important it is to be able to distinguish quickly between the two mimics and learn to prioritize taking out the Stormtrooper mimics in combat. For the shooting pattern, the Stormtrooper mimic starts with 36 to 39 shots with randomized split-second gaps in between. After this, if it has any ammo left, it'll pause for a third of a second and say a voice line, and fire the remaining 1 to 3 ammo. Lastly, it'll take 3.5 seconds to reload, and then it'll repeat the sequence. Next is the Marksman mimic, an extremely well camouflaged sniper who wields an SVD with a unique scope. It has 150 health, a magazine size of 10, and deals 22 damage per bullet on normal, and 27.5 damage per bullet on realistic. Its shooting pattern is one shot every 2 seconds, except for the 4th, 7th, and 10th shots, which take only 1.5 seconds and come with a voice line. After 10 seconds, the Marksman takes 3 seconds to reload its magazine, only adding a second to its most common 2-second gap between shots. The last mimic is the Machine Gunner mimic, which is the only entity with 4 hands. It has the highest health in the game at 280, has the largest magazine size in the game at 75, and fortunately only deals 14 damage per bullet on normal and 17.5 damage on realistic. With max protection on normal, you're only dealing 2 damage per bullet, exactly half the Stormtrooper mimic's 4 damage per bullet. Its attack pattern starts with 51 shots and usually 3 or 4 random micro gaps in between, then a quarter-second gap with a voice line, and 24 shots with usually 1 or 2 micro gaps in between. After this, it takes 3.4 seconds to reload before repeating the sequence. One last detail, the Machine Gunner mimic shoots about 11 bullets a second, which is 1 higher than the Stormtrooper mimic. Now let's talk about fragments, which are much less complex than mimics. That being said, there are still some useful useful things to know. Unlike mimics, fragments only have two states, passive and combat. In their passive state, they'll either stand still or slowly patrol. To identify a fragment is nearby, you can listen for the crunching sound it makes when it walks. In their combat state, fragments will immediately take the shortest path to get to you. The combat state is activated instantly when a fragment spots you, and will make a loud shriek before moving towards you. I'll start by diving into the basic fragment stats. It has 54 health and deals 16 damage on normal. Just like in nearly every other entity, damage goes up by 25% on realistic, which in this case adds up to 20 damage. Its attack pattern always starts with a half-second wind-up, then it does its punching animation, which takes exactly 1 second, and is split up into 2 parts of 16 damage every half second. Put simply, you take damage on the punch, and take damage when the fragment brings its arm back as well. One interesting thing about the basic fragment, as well as the phantom, which I'll get into next, is they can't go inside certain sheds. In fact, once you go inside, they'll immediately start passively meandering as if you disappear. I doubt this quirk will stay till 1.0, but as of now, if you lose the position of a fragment or phantom, it doesn't hurt to retreat to a shed for safety. Next is the recently added phantom, which has the same 54 health, 16 damage on normal, and also the same strange janky movement as the basic fragment. However, from a distance, the phantom is made of a translucent material that is most easily recognized by its orange skeletal outline every few seconds, and its orange and black walking animation. Both of these orange glowing effects are especially easy to see at night, which brilliantly solves the visibility problem I personally had with phantoms in the first game. Next is the recovering fragment, which is far stronger and faster than both the basic fragment as well as the phantom. It has 180 health and deals either 22 or 44 damage on normal, and on realistic it deals 27.5 or 55 damage. The attack pattern starts with about a half-second initial wind-up, and goes through a random sequence of punches, which deal 22 damage and take a third of a second each, or a kick, which take only a third of a second to strike, but afterward adds a 2/3 of a second delay before the next attack. One important detail, recovering fragments will choose to punch about 2/3 of the time, and will choose to kick only about 1/3 of the time. Another upgrade from the basic fragment is the fact that the recovering fragment can completely revive itself. On killing the recovering fragment, the core will drop from its head and slowly fall to the ground. If the core isn't destroyed in 10 seconds, the recovering fragment will pull together its fallen pieces and recover all its 180 health. The core only has 1 health, but from a distance it can be difficult to hit, especially with certain firearms and sights. Also, I'd recommend waiting to shoot the orb for the first 2.5 to 3 seconds, since it takes about 3 seconds to fully stabilize. Another important tip for shotgun users is to always use buckshot and always aim for the head. With buckshot, you can kill the fragment and destroy the orb in just 1 headshot, while with the slugs, you need to kill the fragment and destroy the orb separately. Another thing, every time the recovering fragment is shot, it ducks and becomes temporarily immune to being shot in the head, so if your specific interaction requires 2 critical hits in a row, wait till its head comes all the way back up before attempting another headshot. Also, shout out to Anomalous Insect and Timid Bunny for finding this unique interaction, where destroying the core of a recovering or exploding fragment inside an electric cube's lightning storm creates this epic orange lightning. Onto the exploding fragment, which I consider a slightly weaker version of the recovering fragment. First off, it has a much larger head, giving us an easier target for critical hits, and instead of 180 health, it only has 150, so it can be killed by most security level 4 firearms in 1 shot. Another important interaction is with the Beretta M9, which now only needs 1 critical hit and 1 normal hit to get the kill. So instead of waiting for its head to come all the way back up after landing a critical hit, you can get in the habit of quickly shooting its large midsection for a faster kill. However, the exploding fragment's damage and attack pattern are still the same as the recovering fragment. The largest difference between these 2 fragments is the, again slightly larger, exploding core, which deals up to 30 damage the closer you are to it when it's destroyed. The blast radius is fairly small, but if you're unsure if you're within the range, it's smart to slowly back away from it while you're waiting 3 seconds for the core to stabilize. Next, let's talk about creeps, and I'll start with the creep monster. For whatever reason, I've been calling these spawns, but I can't argue with the death screen. On normal, the creep monster has 36 health and deals only 12 damage, and on realistic, the damage goes up to 15. As it moves, it sounds like a choir of scissors cutting, which is logical since it's made up of ribbon and scissors. The creep monster's attack pattern starts with a randomized stalking period, where it circles around you quickly and bounces often, making it very difficult to predict its movements accurately enough to land a shot. Though eventually, it'll approach and do a 1-second hiss while preparing to pounce. From there, it'll take up to half a second to reach its target, and about another half second to reach the ground. Whether the attack hits or misses, there's a minimum of 6 seconds before it attacks again. An important thing to realize is that both creeps target the head, so if you duck at the right moment and from a far enough distance away, it'll jump right over you. To time it correctly, I duck when the volume and pitch of the hiss start dropping, pitch down, head down, so to speak. Next is the creep hunter, which is a much deadlier and more camouflaged variation of the creep. On normal, it has a slightly higher health of 45 and deals 15 damage per attack, and on realistic ballistic deals 25% more damage at 19. Instead of a choir of scissors cutting, the creep hunter sounds like a bike chain spinning. Again, this makes sense since it's literally made up of bike chains and rope. The creep hunter's attack pattern also starts with a randomized stalking period. Eventually, it'll approach and also do a 1-second hiss while preparing to pounce, take up to a half second to reach its target, and another half second to land. However, on landing, this is where the attack turns slightly deadlier. If you manage to dodge the creep hunter's first attack, either by sprinting, timing a duck correctly, or putting an object between you and the creep hunter while it prepares to attack, it'll wait about 3 seconds before following up with a second attack. The second attack is much more difficult to time for dodging since there's no windup or hiss. The last entity for now, as of 0.14, is the cube, which is the largest and also one of the easiest entities to counter and into the radius too. While there are similarities between the BTR from the first game, the cube has a much larger patrol loop, fewer blind spots, and longer vision from the sky, and it has a much more complex attack and attack pattern. For health, it's either infinite or extremely high. I made a short in 0.13 where I thought I killed it, but it's also possible it was a glitch. If anyone else took the time to try killing it, I'd love to hear your results. In any case, it's always the most impractical option to kill the cube, since even if you manage to, it respawns right away at the beginning of its patrol loop. The cube's attack consists of 3 large exploding orbs, which each deal more damage the closer to the center of the explosion you are, similar to the function of the exploding fragments core. On all difficulties, the first orb deals up to 35 damage, the second orb deals up to 25 damage, and the third orb deals up to 19 damage. Alright, so the cube starts in the patrol state where it loops around the same area continuously. Once it spots you, it will enter the alarm state where it shines a spotlight on you and moves to its normal position in the shortest path towards you. Next is the attack state where it takes about 8 to 10 seconds to rotate the orbs that surround it into a triangle formation. The time varies depending on where the orbs happen to be when the attack sequence starts. Next, there's about a 1.5 second pause before firing the first projectile, where you'll hear a light whooshing sound as the shot is fired. For optimizing stamina, I'd recommend simply walking once spotted by the cube, then using the whooshing sound as a signal to start sprinting. Anyway, the first shot will land after about 2.5 seconds, but can be much sooner if the cube is closer than its maximum range. During that time, the cube will re-aim, and the second projectile will land about 1.75 seconds after the first. Let me repeat myself, the cube re-aims for each individual attack. That means each orb will land in the exact position you were when the shot was initially fired, and there's 0 homing. The third projectile will then land about 1.25 seconds after the second projectile lands. After this, the cube takes about 11 seconds to regenerate, arrange in a triangle formation, and start firing the next projectiles. The last thing I want to mention is the cube's fourth state, Suspicious. After you've been spotted and the cube begins its attack animations, it'll always finish the attack, even if you hide from its view. Though, if it can't see you, it'll attack the last place you were seen. After the attack animation is finished, the cube enters the Suspicious state if it doesn't see you. For a short period of time, it'll wait, staring at the last place you were visible, and bringing the orbs into the triangle formation and ready to fire. Well, that's all for the video. If you want to see more guides like this and other Into the Radius 2 stuff, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.